government parties is possible over the issue of clarity on when abortion is permissible here in Ireland. The Labour Party wants legislation, whereas the Fine Gael party seems to want something short of legislation. With us are Niamh Ní Bhríon, spokeswoman for the Life Institute, Claire Daly, TD of the United Left Alliance, Berry Kiely, medical consultant to the pro-life campaign, and Alison O'Connell, columnist and journalist. Later we'll be joined for a preview of tomorrow morning's newspapers by David Burke, editor of the Tuama Herald. If you'd like to comment to the programme, you can text us at 53131 and place the word tonight before a comment. Send us a tweet at #B or email us at tonight@tv3.ie. James Riley was understood to have said in the Dáil a few weeks ago that legislation would be introduced in the Dáil to deal with the issue, to clarify the issue to do with when abortion is permissible here. But today he clarified the clarification. Just have a look at this.
In the Dáil, I committed to the fact that this government would not be the seventh government to fail to address this issue, and I stand over that. Some people took that to mean that I wasn't going to legislate, or I was going to legislate. Other people took it to mean there'd be a referendum. I didn't commit to either of those things, and it would be improper of me to do so given that we have an expert group going to report to us to point the way forward. So I want to study that report, I want to bring it to Cabinet. It is my belief that it should be published, but that'll be a decision for Cabinet, and it'll inform the next move on this issue that has, let's face it, divided this country for the last 20 years in several referenda. I want primarily out of this ABC report, and I want to separate it from the terrible tragedy in Galway. But what I want out of this is clarity for the medical profession as to what actions they can take that are within the law in the best interests of patients, and it has to be in the best interests of patients. So I think our citizens deserve no less than that, and I think the profession that have to deliver the care need that as well and deserve no less, and I'm determined that that'll happen.
Let's have a look at tomorrow morning, the front page of tomorrow morning's Irish Independent, and it shows Gilmore and Kenny now differ over abortion law. Taoiseach reluctant to act. Envoy, that's the I assume the somebody from India, I assume, soothes Savita concerns. Alison, just explain to me, how does one get legal clarity other than by law?
I think you'd find it exceptionally difficult, and that's the problem that we have as it stands, that even outside of this tragic situation in Galway. I did a radio column on entirely coincidentally 2 or 3 weeks ago, where I spoke to an obstetrician and asked that obstetrician, how this all worked in practice, and did some other research around it. And my conclusion at the end of that was that it was an utterly ridiculous situation because there was no clarity, and that we don't know the circumstances in Galway, but in general I would have a lot of sympathy for obstetricians, that you may say there's the Medical Council guidelines or whatever, but at the end of the day it is a very grey area. The doctors are generally quite terrified, because even if they do take action that they believe to be right, there may be others working in the same hospital with them who believe it to be wrong and who may report them to the Medical Council. I believe that if you ended up as a woman pregnant with a difficulty such as that your membranes had ruptured, you would be fine if you were in one of the 3 Dublin hospitals or perhaps any of the other major hospitals around the country. But that if you were in a smaller hospital, or in a particular hospital where a doctor did have a moral stance, a particular moral stance, that as a woman you could have serious difficulties there. Because in my research, from talking to people, for instance, in one particular instance, there was no ethics committee. If you present and you're a patient and you're a very difficult case, the doctor generally acts on their own. They will discuss it with colleagues. There's no note taken of the discussions or who said what, so that to an extent your main physician is then out on their own with the decision that they have taken. And afterwards, what's written on your chart is that it was a medical induction. And nobody goes through the files afterwards to check, was this a medical induction that took place before the fetus was viable, which is what the situation was, and that the reason it was done was because there was a medical threat to the mother's life. And it's if you look, I mean, I'm looking here at the medical councils. In exceptional circumstances, it may be necessary to intervene to terminate the baby to protect the life of the mother, while making every effort to preserve the life of the baby.
Yeah, it's clear as
therefore,
mud. Yeah.
So if you're an obstetrician, I mean, you were the burden of you're the person that's going to have to turn around and prove, and yet your hospital has no particular guidelines on it, none that anyone has written out and explained. And to be a pregnant female in that particular instance and facing that sort of a situation, to me it's an absolute dereliction of duty, and has been on the part of politicians, that this situation has not been remedied.
Niamh?
Well, I'm afraid I don't agree with Alison, and I think, to be honest, Alison, you've used the word "I believe" a lot, because there isn't evidence to back up what you're saying. For example,
but I have spoken. I won't interrupt you, other than to say, Niamh, I spoke to practitioners.
She just gave evidence.
No, but for example, there is no evidence, and I noticed that Sam Coulter-Smith, the master of the Rotunda, was quoted today in saying that there's no evidence of confusion in medical ranks in Ireland over whether or not a woman can have an abortion.
How come
if
a
her
lot
life
of his
is at
colleagues
risk.
are confused?
His colleagues are not confused, Vincent, and there's no evidence that they are confused. Like I'm by listening to obstetricians discussing this case in the last 48 hours.
Master of a Holles Street hospital this morning, and he said there was confusion.
He said that he was looking for clarity. But if we look,
why would you look for clarity unless there's confusion?
But he didn't say there was confusion.
But why would he look for clarity then?
Sam Coulter-Smith also said that there wasn't confusion, and the Institute of Obstetricians and Gynecologists have not said that there is confusion. So you have to look at the broad thrust of the obstetricians and gynecologists out there and see what they are saying. Now, the All-Party Oireachtas Committee actually reviewed medical practice in Ireland specifically in relation to this issue, and they found that there was no evidence that women in Ireland were being denied medical treatment because of our ban on abortion. And that's really important. It's really important to look what's actually happening statistically. Women in Ireland are not dying because they can't access life-saving treatment.
From the Medical Council adjudication on this, that Alison just quoted. And it may be necessary to intervene to terminate the pregnancy to protect the life of the mother while making every effort to preserve the life of the baby. What does that mean?
Could I perhaps explain that? Would that be a bit better? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you.
Whatever about interrupting people on your own side, on the other side. Interrupting people on your own side seems a bit ungenerous.
Forgive me, but I'll interrupt if you don't mind. The reason why I wanted to interrupt on this is because...
Why, you don't think that Niamh's going to reply properly?
No, because I have personal experience of it.
Well, you have personal experience of it?
Yeah, because...
Of what?
I'm a paediatrician. Right? I trained in paediatrics. I did quite a bit of neonatology in my time. What that means is that where an obstetrician deems it necessary to intervene, as happens rarely, occasionally, but it does happen, situations of high blood pressure in the mother, eclampsia, things like that, and he needs to intervene, or she needs to intervene to deliver this mother. To deliver the mother early. And there's little chance of this baby surviving. But doing everything you can to ensure the baby survives means you tell the paediatricians you're delivering this baby. You're there, present at the delivery. You have all your equipment. This is the reality on the ground.
But don't mind the reality on the ground. That could be illegal for all you know.
There's nothing illegal about it. There never has been.
You're required to do everything in your power to preserve the life of the baby, according to the Medical Council. That's not doing everything in your power.
It is doing everything. It's doing everything.
One person might think it was everything in your power, and another may not.
Can we just keep a little bit of reality in this?
Thank you for that.
Yeah, reality here. Two things to distinguish here. One is the management of miscarriage, and another is abortion. The management of miscarriage is fairly simple, fairly straightforward. There are three options. You have expectant treatment, you have induction of labour, and you have surgical evacuation by D&C. All three, let me finish. All three are internationally recognised good practice.
That's how abortions take place, isn't it?
But we're talking now about a miscarriage. We're talking about abortion. Vincent, the key thing in an abortion is that you do not want this baby to survive. At the end of the day, if the baby survives, it's a failed abortion. If what you want is an abortion, you do not want a living baby at the end of it. What you're talking about in a miscarriage is this woman is losing this pregnancy, very often a wanted pregnancy, a desired pregnancy. She would love that baby to survive, but it's actually being lost, and there's nothing anybody can do, man, woman or child, to change that. No, just to clarify.
Wait a minute now, your interruption of your colleague is long enough. Now, I'm sorry, your interruption, I don't. Niamh, you want to finish what you're going to say. Go on, finish what you're going to say.
I was going to say that the Medical Council does have legal standing, so it's not correct to say that these are not legal guidelines. It can order doctors to come before it. It can strike doctors off if they breach the ethical guidelines. And I think your reading of the Medical Council's guidelines are wrong. As far as I can see from an ordinary reading of it, Vincent, the emphasis here is to preserve the life of the mother, while making every effort to preserve the life of the baby. And that's
every effort. Does it mean every effort?
The emphasis and the first reference...
It's a nonsense.
Vincent, the emphasis and the first reference is to save the life of the mother. And I think you are doing obstetrics in Ireland a huge disservice. I've had 4 children in Irish maternity hospitals. My life
I'm
is never
talking
in
about
danger.
The Medical Council is not a legal authority. Let's be absolutely clear. It has a legal standing, same as Board BIA has a legal standing.
Not at all, that's not true. The Medical Council it can bring doctors before it. It has a judicial authority to bring doctors before it, to strike them off.
It hasn't judicial authority. It has no judicial authority. Claire.
The air of unreality about this discussion is astounding. We've had the focus of the country on the tragic circumstances of Savita's death. We've had numerous obstetricians and medical professional people on the airwaves and in the media explaining the reality that there is a huge confusion. We've 2 years of a European Court of Human Rights ruling which said that we have violated human rights in this country because we failed to provide that certainty and give the medical profession the ability to implement the constitutional right of a woman to secure an abortion where her life is in danger. And when they investigated the reason why there weren't any of those abortions, it was because of the uncertainty around the issues. Now, that is a fact. It is absolutely undisputed. And the idea that we are having this discussion here at a time when a young woman is dead, I find absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. It is clear that there is uncertainty.
You're allowed only interrupt your colleague. Go on.
Here we have the world's media focused on the tragic death of a young woman brought into hospital miscarrying. Doctors, obviously we don't have the full circumstances, but probably believed that that miscarriage could occur naturally, left the woman in horrendous pain for days and so on, and refused to carry out a termination, from what we're told.
No, well, we don't know about that. We don't know about it.
We don't know the full circumstances. Can I finish the point, Vincent? Is it reasonable, or what would a doctor do in the... Can I finish the point and you might understand? What would a doctor do...
Sorry, Niamh, you've been on the programme before and you persistently interrupted other people when you were on the programme before. Please don't do so tonight. So just stop. Now, Claire, finish your point.
It has been reported that obstetricians in Britain have stated that the biggest cause of maternal death in Britain is blood poisoning as a result of infection and so on, E. coli, the very circumstances in which Savita died in. When a woman is fully dilated, left that way for days, with her waters broken and exposed to infection, in horrendous pain, vomiting and collapsing, does that increase the risk of infection? Absolutely. It is a reasonable viewpoint to say that you are substantially risking her life by leaving her in that situation. So why would a doctor do so? Because the basis on which he's operating and trying to do his job is primary legislation of the Offences Against the Persons Act 1861, where he could be deemed guilty of criminal negligence and be subjected to penal servitude for life for assisting in procuring an abortion. Clearly it is the uncertainty surrounding this issue that has resulted in this situation.
In essence, just a line, in essence, you have medical doctors, obstetricians, who are caring for women whose lives are potentially under threat, who have this underlying thought at the back of their minds of, if I take action now, I think this woman's life may possibly be at risk. Am I going to ruin my career?
Now, there is, separate from what we've discussed, there is, Barry, I'll put this point to you, and please reply to this rather than something else, that it is possible to have an abortion legally in Ireland where there is substantial risk to the life of the mother. But what constitutes a substantial risk? In the case of a woman, for instance, whose cervix is dilated and she's open to infection for a protracted period of time, you could argue that there isn't a substantial risk, just a risk to her life. It would seem to me that that is something that would need to be clarified by law. Now, that isn't just the need for legislation isn't just my opinion or Eamon Gilmore's opinion or even the Medical Council's opinion. It is the opinion of the Supreme Court that clarity is required by law. Shouldn't there be clarity?
I'll put it this way, Vincent. It's actually a very complex thing, and I don't want to give you a simple answer, but there are many grey areas in medicine, not only in obstetrics. We don't ordinarily try to resolve all grey areas by trying to specify in law for each and every case that might possibly arise, because that would actually just be impossible. So while you may want to have a certain amount of regulation or legal guidance there, the truth of the matter is the best you can do, and even the Medical Council would say about its own guidelines, that they're not specifying what to do in any one individual case. All you can do is give guidelines, and that's as much as the law is going to be able to do as well, because in a situation you need you need that the doctor is actually able to, a doctor with due qualification, with experience, with sort of taking all the factors into account, but is actually able to make the decision that he or she deems is the best one for this particular patient at this particular time.
Assistance by law that gives the guideline.
Yeah. Now, can I just move on from that though, just for a minute, just to clarify here. The reality of it is, when you're dealing with a pregnant woman, at any stage in that pregnancy, if her life requires it, if her, if she needs it, like in this particular case, I mean, you don't want to talk about it because we haven't heard from the doctors in Galway, so we don't know the.
Let's not talk about this case.
There would be nothing.
An instance where a woman is pregnant. The fetus is certainly going to there's certainly going to be a miscarriage, but the fetus is still alive.
But that's no impediment.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, the fact that you still have a beating heart is not an impediment to doing any treatment that's required, neither in law, nor in ethics, nor in anything else. But it is an impediment where there isn't clarity that there's substantial risk to the life of the mother.
No, and if you had, I'm sorry. I'm not specifying. It's a brief point. It's a brief point. I'm not specifying this tragic case in Galway. I've no idea what went on. But if you have that legal grey area, but you could also have a doctor who has a particular moral stance and goes with his view of the legal grey area.
Can I agree with Berry?
Can I say that Claire sat here and acted and talked as if she knew exactly what happened in that hospital in Galway? None of us know, Vincent. You don't know, I don't know, Claire doesn't know. And that's why the Minister has ordered 2 investigations into what happened, and they will tell us what happened. And it seems on the surface of it, and I don't want to talk about this case in particular, this is a miscarriage gone terribly wrong. But the bottom line is, are women dying in Ireland because of a lack of clarity? No, they are not.
I don't know.
There is no evidence that they are whatsoever.
But we know from our maternal mortality statistics that
the All-Party Oireachtas Committee's review found that they were not. Our maternal mortality rates remain terribly low. You had a doctor on your programme last night, Dr. Walsh from the Sims Clinic, and he testified that in England, where abortion is readily available, a woman dies every month from what poor Savita Halappan died of in Galway last week. Or last month. So a woman in England dies every month of sepsis where they have abortion. So we need to shift this debate away from pretending that abortion is a cure for sepsis. And I do believe, and can I be frank here, well, if you read the papers, abortion campaigners have jumped on this case. They have made the most outrageous claims. I have an email here from one of your colleagues, Claire Paul Murphy, or your previous colleague, Paul Murphy, where he says that the very unfortunate death of poor Savita was that she was a victim of Ireland's ban on abortion. These are extraordinary claims that are being made, and they're entirely untrue. And I also have an email which I find very worrying. I got a copy of an email correspondence between two members of the Irish Choice Network, and these emails were written 4 to 5 days before this story was broken in the Irish Times, and they talked about how to proceed using this information and about the death of this woman. It's got to do with the fact that people are using this issue to try to legalise abortion.
Okay, maybe. But we're not talking about that. The issue that we're talking about is there a problem with legal uncertainty with regard to all this? And if there is a problem with legal uncertainty, surely we've got to deal with it legally. And there's also the little point that the Supreme Court in 1992 said legislation was required. Now that's a pretty authoritative source for such a view. Now, shouldn't we be dealing with what the Supreme Court says is necessary? Shouldn't we get on with it? Simple.
I think we should be making things as best as possible for mothers and their babies. And according to Sam Coulter-Smith and according to the evidence given by the Institute of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists previously, there isn't a confusion there for obstetricians. But you're talking about what's the best way to proceed.
I'm saying the Supreme Court in 1992, in its judgment in X case, a number of the judges in that criticised the Oireachtas for failing to legislate and said there needs to be legislation to clarify these matters.
But I don't think anyone has a problem with clarity, but what kind of clarity are we looking at?
Exactly.
Are we talking about Eamon Gilmore's kind of clarity?
Then what's your problem? What's your problem then?
Well, see, Vincent, for example, Eamon Gilmore's kind of clarity is to legalise abortion on demand. It's also Clare's kind of clarity, I'm afraid to say.
How do you say that it's legal?
Because he wants to legalise abortion based on the British model. So the clarity he is seeking to introduce into Irish law is to introduce abortion on demand.
It would be unconstitutional. You can't do that here.
This
is just nonsense. Just a minute, Claire, just a minute. This is a nonsense.
No, it's not, because if you legislate for
it doesn't matter what Eamon Gilmore wants. It's not possible to do that here.
Well,
and so it's irrelevant to the discussion, and it's just a piece of hysterics.
No, it's not.
Just hang on.
Vincent, you're the one who's hysterical, to be frank.
But just hang on. The issue is, should we have clarity about the constitutional position that in certain very exceptional cases abortion is permissible here? Shouldn't we have clarity? You said yourself we should have clarity.
I said we should, but not the kind of clarity that Eamon Gilmore is seeking, which is to legalise abortion on demand.
Don't mind about Eamon Gilmore.
It does matter. He's the Taoiseach of the country.
If he is proposing for abortion on demand, which seems to me just ridiculous. There's no suggestion of that.
Fine.
Anyway, it's unconstitutional.
He's looking for. He said that the X case could be used to legalise abortion based on the British model. If anyone doesn't believe that the British government, the British state has abortion on demand, they are fooling themselves.
Can we come back to reality and come down to earth here? Could I go back to a point that Berry made, which was about the fact that medical procedures and medical practice have many grey areas and are extremely complicated, and that in that sense are maybe not the best suited for legislation. I agree with her. The difference between this medical procedure, however, and all the other grey areas that doctors have to grapple with in order to provide the best care for their patients is no other medical procedure is operating with a constitutional provision behind it which equates the life of the unborn with the life of the woman. And there lies the problem. It is as a result of that constitutional amendment. My own personal belief, Niamh, is absolutely correct, is that the only way forward for women and doctors is to repeal the 8th Amendment and have a situation where this is dealt with by regulation.
That's a completely different point now. We're just
but in the meantime, we have to regulate by legislation.
Vincent, I'm curious. We're looking at this particular situation similar to this very tragic case in Galway. But I'm looking back to the case of the woman in Cork who had cancer, who was gravely ill, who was taking medication, was on a medical trial, discovered she was pregnant. As I understand it, as part of that trial, you couldn't continue taking the drug if you were pregnant. There was an ethics committee in the hospital that met, and I believe really at great mental torture to themselves, but it was decided they could not give this gravely ill woman an abortion in the hospital because her life was not at immediate risk. She didn't even have a passport. She had to get a passport, travel to the UK, have an abortion, come home. Within months she was dead. What happens in that sort of a case? Where's the humanity in that?
Well, do you know, I mean, again, it's always difficult to comment on individual cases when you
but
don't have all the details.
Cases.
No, I know, but what you're saying is this woman had the abortion and still she died.
Yeah, but the point about it
So
is she
what's
was
the
on, I
issue?
mean,
Like,
that
the issue
medication
here-
was going to prolong her life. And the fact, I mean, and can you imagine at that
No, but
stage
hang on.
of
If you
her
look at-
illness,
if
having
you
to
look at
travel,
the
the
actual-
trauma.
If you look at the reality at a recent symposium, international symposium on managing of health in pregnant women, there was a very good presentation done by a specialist in cancer in pregnancy from Belgium. And he was very simple, straightforward and clear on the fact that we now are able to say that pregnancy is not an issue in relation to cancer.
Well, it was
for women.
for this particular woman and for her particular case and for the
But that's what I'm
medication
saying.
that she was on
we
that was
don't
prolonging her
have the
life.
details enough to know. But I mean, the reality of it is,
But
women
what do you think of the
are not,
I'm curious as
and
to what
do
you think
not
of the
be-
humanity of that situation.
Imagine, Alison, what I think all of the time is that whether it's a mother or a baby or a man or anybody, I don't want to see anybody's life being lost. Let's have no doubts about this. Nobody here
No, but
is
let's
saying
deal with this woman who was gravely ill with
Alison,
cancer
I don't have-
and who had to get a passport and had to travel to the UK, have an abortion, come
I don't
back.
understand why she had to have the abortion.
She had to have the abortion because of the medical trial that she was on, but
But
also
that
she
medicine-
was, in that instance, that she was so gravely ill with cancer that the pregnancy was not going to do her, it was not going to assist her health in any way.
But neither probably was it going to do her any harm. That's what international
Yeah. No,
evidence
I believe
is shown
in this
to
instance
us.
it-
But as
it
I
would
say,
have-
without the details, you can't comment on it. Without
I
knowing
think-
what type
Alison,
of
it is
cancer,
a fair
where, or
point,
whatever.
but if the pregnancy was going to do her no harm and wasn't going to shorten her life,
No,
what's the
Vincent,
issue?
no, I didn't say that.
But
As far
that's-
as I'm concerned, it was going to.
Yeah.
Barry is
Well-
saying there are circumstances
Well, as
where
far
it,
as you're
where it
concerned,
doesn't.
Well, in most
Alison,
circumstances it
Alison,
doesn't.
let's be fair now. The issue depends crucially on whether her pregnancy was going to shorten her life or whether it was going to make her health significantly worse.
But it's
Surely.
also that she had to come off the medical trial if she was pregnant. She could not
Why?
continue taking that
Why?
because it was. Listen, why?
Like, if she's going
it was
to-
one of the rules of the drug companies.
So the
providing
rules
the
of
drug.
the drug company are
So-
more important.
Yes.
The rules of the drug
But I
company
mean,
are more
I'm
important
just talking
than
about this.
treating
I'm
her.
talking about
That's
the case
in effect
involved.
what you're saying,
Yeah, but
Alison.
listen,
You're saying that the rules of this drug company trumped everything else.
Barry,
Trumped
Barry,
the fact
Okay.
that
Barry,
it
I think
prolonged
if
her
we were
life.
to rewind here, you'd find I didn't say that at
okay.
all.
But
What
in
I'm
effect,
saying is,
that's what's amounting
I'm not
to.
saying I agreed with those rules. I'm saying
Yeah.
that's the situation
Yes.
the woman faced.
Well, I'd say in those situations, let's change the rules.
Well, I put it another way to you, right? If you're saying there's no circumstances where a woman's life is ever in danger that would require an abortion, what's your problem with legislation brought in? Are you so strung out that you're upset that the government is bringing in legislation for nothing? That's hardly something
Well,
to get.
I'll tell
Can
you
I
what
finish my
problem is.
point? I didn't
Yeah.
interrupt
No,
you.
no, I just want
Thanks.
to answer you.
You can in a minute. I think your problem is, and I think Niamh sort of touched on it, is that real life cases expose the difficulty that this issue has landed women in and has landed the medical profession in, and you can't handle it because you like to talk in emotive language and generalities, where what we're talking about is the reality that thousands of Irish women every year have
Why do
abortion.
we have to have a personalised attack?
It's like personalising attacking things.
Don't worry.
You were
like
criticising
Simon Cowell or something.
Barry as that she wants some kind of power thrill in blocking legislation. That seems
I'm questioning
hardly to be-
why she's getting so distressed about this legislation if in her mind and her opinion there's never a reason why it would ever be have any effect, because there's never any circumstances when a woman's life is in danger.
Okay,
so
Barry,
presumably
reply.
the law would never
Hold on, Claire, I didn't say there's never a situation in which a woman's life is in danger. There are unfortunately many situations in which, not many, but there are some situations in which a woman's life is in danger. And when a woman's life is in danger, there's nothing in medical ethics or law in this country that impedes a doctor doing whatever needs to be done. My point is that abortion is never necessary to save the life of the mother. Early induction of labour may be necessary,
Okay, we want to go to
and
a
it
break.
is perfectly
break,
permissible.
But can I just ask you, in a situation in which a woman is about to have a miscarriage, she's gravely ill, her cervix is open, and she's in danger of getting infection. It may not be a substantial threat to the life of the woman, but it's certainly a threat to the life of the woman. In such circumstances where a miscarriage is going to take place anyway and the fetus is not going to survive, isn't there an ambiguity in the present legal situation about whether that termination is permissible? Isn't there uncertainty?
I don't think so, Vincent. If you just take the fact that there are thousands...
Do you acknowledge that
there's no impediment?
Do you think that other people, including obstetricians, think there's uncertainty?
I'll tell you, the evidence would suggest that no, there isn't.
There are
thousands. Hold on, let me explain.
Okay, right.
There are something between 10 and 15,000 miscarriages in Ireland every year. We've never had a case like this before. Why? Because doctors do whatever needs to be done in order to treat the particular woman in the particular case. That's the reality of it. Because we would pick them up in maternal deaths. Well, they are examined very closely, Claire. I'm surprised you don't know this.
This is very important.
I want to leave it at this. I certainly have grave sympathy for the people involved, the obstetricians involved in these very difficult cases where they simply don't know what the legal situation is, and they don't understand what they're going to do.
We only know about this case because the woman's husband came forward. There were two unexplained deaths.
We've got to go to a break, and after the break we may continue the discussion a little bit, and we'll preview tomorrow morning's newspapers. Join us after the break. We're joined by David Burke, editor of the Tuam Herald, for our preview of tomorrow morning's newspapers. Just before we get to the newspapers, to go to some of your tweets. Zalka von Tessa, I assume that's a made-up name. It says, no to abortion on demand. It will be used as a contraception method. Treat each case in its merits. Who's advocating in these circumstances abortion on demand now? Anyway, no woman would ever have an abortion, I assume, or could avail of abortion unless she asked for it, surely. Anyway, yes, we need legal clarity to further dither and delay. This will cost even more mothers' lives. That's from Colm in Monaghan. Darren O'Keefe says, I've never met anybody who is pro-abortion. The lobby does not exist. I've never met anyone who's pro-abortion either. And somebody else says, a friend of mine who was receiving cancer treatment had to stop when it was discovered she was pregnant. She died within days of birth. All right, let's go to the front page of tomorrow morning's newspapers. We start with the Irish Sun. A sinister twist in Poppy Row. Cops probe death threat to McLean. Cops have launched a probe into death threats against Poppy Row Sutherland star James McLean. In the Irish Daily Mail, doctors should have known they could act, says a ex-Galway hospital professor. And a husband thanks Irish people, and James Riley says inquiry must stand up to scrutiny of the world. I think it's really unfair on the doctors involved in this case. That I've utmost sympathy with them, and I'm sure they were deeply conflicted and didn't know what to do, and most of us wouldn't know what to do in those circumstances. The Irish Independent, Gilmore and Kenny now differ over abortion law. Taoiseach reluctant to act, envoy soothes Savita concerns. And over on the right, main banks paying 28 executives more than €400,000. And the Irish Daily Star, only a mother knows the pain. Savita's distraught mum calls for a law change. And that's it. We'll have the Irish Times shortly. Okay, David, what stories do you want to focus on?
Well, if I could mention first of all, Vincent, Professor Eamon O'Dwyer in Galway on the topic that has dominated the discussions for ages, a very eminent man in his field. And we had a story in the Tuam Herald a few years ago, which was obviously true, that Galway was the safest place not only in Ireland but in the world in which to have a baby, and that situation can't have changed that much since then. So I think that follows on to your point about the medical people who were involved in this tragic case. But to move away from this awful case, I think something that people will get a bit worked up about is midway through the story on the right-hand side of the Independent, where
soon to commit on abortion legislation, says Riley. Minister wants to consider a report by expert group on terminations, and HICWA seeks assurances from Galway and HSE of proper standards of safe care. Also, there are free GP care included in health proposals. Okay, sorry, David, what other stories do you want to focus on?